You're listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and people who play it. Today is October 26th, 2025, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine Sunday?
Spencer, hello. I'm doing well. It's been another super busy week for me, and I'm in a spot where I have more on my WoW agenda for the rest of the week before reset than I would really like there to be. And be cool if that would stop life. But here we are. But I'm here. We got a bunch of stuff to. Man, it's been a week of stuff. I don't want to say news because it's not the game that we're playing right now, but man, we got some stuff from Blizzard this week about future development that has been, I don't know, I don't want to say explosive, but there's certainly been some stuff that I don't think has been super well received, including by me personally. So yeah, it's a really weird time in the game because, man, like, I don't know. I still have stuff I want to do in season 2 that I'm now like sort of not getting done. We got 11.27 PTR. We got Midnight Alpha. We got Legion Remix, which is the time is just ticking away on that.
Yep.
And I also have like a life to live, and sometimes other video games I want to play even. Yep. So I mean, this is another week in a row I didn't touch Alpha. Like, I just don't have time. So it's really tough. Well, I feel like there's too much happening around the sphere right now.
Housing was down this week, so you didn't miss too much. I'm just kidding. There's a lot to do in Alpha outside of housing, so there's a lot going on there, and yeah, no, it's a very busy time both in life for me as well as video games, because there's just, as you said, a lot of video games that are out this week that are not just out this week, that are out in general that people are really diving into and spending time on. So it is difficult to fit in everything you want to do. I definitely feel the burden of having an adult job where I have to go to this place where I am not engaging in video games and have to then return from it having lost at least 8 to 12 hours of my day. It's really unfortunate, but that's just rude. I think, really, yeah, inconsiderate. And so, yes, it's one of those things where, because of that, I'm with you. I have a lot more things I want to do in World of Warcraft than I have time to actually accomplish. So let's talk about this past week. For me, it hasn't been a lot. This week has been wild. This week and next week are my 10.5-hour days, 4 days a week. That's my whole week, sort of week. So it means that Monday to Thursday, I literally don't really game. I sort of get up early in the morning, go to work, come home from work, have dinner, and then have a couple hours to do something, and then go to bed, and then get up and do the same thing again for 4 days in a row. And it meant that, Friday I got to play video games, which was fun, and Saturday I got to dabble a little bit, but I haven't been able to do a ton. So this was the unlock week for Cress, which means I did get online, open my vault, select. I think I got, what did I get this week? This was so long ago. I logged in on Tuesday for 15 minutes to open my vault. I definitely got a socket last week. This week, I think I got a trinket that I was looking for. And yeah, and then I did all of my crest conversions. So I went to the vendor, I converted all my crests up into gilded. I did a whole bunch of upgrades on my character. My character jumped 4 item levels. And then basically logged out on that tune and haven't been back on it for too long since. I've done a couple things here and there, but I haven't been able to do my Mythic Plus for the week or anything like that. That's still kind of lingering, and it'll be something that probably during raid time tonight or tomorrow, I fit in my 4 Mythic Plus for the week to make sure I still get a vault reward that looks good and get my crest stuff done. Get my, not my crest, my token. What are they called now? I just blanked.
The cartel chips?
Cartel chips. Thank you.
Yes,
oh my goodness. I have to think about gambling. That's the problem. I have to think. I try as much as possible not to think about gambling because it's the advertising for it is everywhere, and I have to think about gambling in order to remember cartel chips. They need to just ditch that and come up with a better name because Dinars was just so much better, man. Just give me the Dinars back.
Well, I think bronze is good too, although there was no dragon theming. But it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of currencies in this game. I don't know if you noticed, so it's hard to keep them straight sometimes.
Yes, it is. But yeah, so I need to get those so that I can buy my mythic boots and then basically upgrade those and then just, chill. It very much is we're now, I think, 200 pulls or so into Dimensius as a team. So I imagine we still have, maybe not quite, maybe we're at like 153 or something like that. But I'm expecting 2 to 3 more weeks before that boss falls over. So I don't think that there's like a real chance of me getting in and seeing raid for a little while, which means that I'm just kind of hanging out. So that is allowing me to have time to do the massive amount of other things in World of Warcraft that there currently is to do, and in life and everything else. So that's how I'm marking my time. I wouldn't say that I'm like missing raid and like I really wish I was in there and this is frustrating and etc. I think I'm kind of just like, all right, this is. Long ago I accepted that this was going to be the case, and I was like, all right, I'll just fill that time with something else. And so I've just anticipated filling that time with something else.
Yeah, it's just that's kind of the way it is. I feel like, and that's the leap that some players are not really willing to make, and that's why you see like turnover or volatility because people are like, oh, I'm not sitting out for anything, and it's like it's not really how it works when it comes to the very high end, but. Yeah, for me, man, raid attendance was just brutal this week, and it's looking even worse for this week coming up. We raided Tuesday, and that was it. Just can't cross the threshold for Mythic. People are just checking out in droves. And I don't know why, because we're only 2.5 months basically into this tier. We're still making good progress. I think the fights are pretty fun. We have a real shot at killing Forge Weaver, and if we can kill Forge Weaver, then probably Fractilis. But not without 20 people and not without polls. So I think we might just be done. I don't really want to call it, but it's like I can only use the tools I have at my disposal. I guess if anybody out there is interested in some casual mythic prog for the rest of the season, look up Zeros to Heroes on Storm Rage and the Integrity team and let me know. Because there's a bunch of us that want to keep doing stuff or are happy to at least have something different to do and don't really want to raid for 90 minutes a week to just crush heroic raid.
Right.
But I think that's where we're at. I think that that this week ended up being just Tuesday. I think this week coming up is going to be the same thing. So it's I guess I'm still enjoying the raid. I mean, I think Maniforge Remake is a really cool raid, and the bosses are fun. With Turbo Boost this week, I mean, we're powering up to just obscene levels for heroic clears, and now this week coming up, we got another 3% coming in. So it's just going to get utterly silly. I did get my vault done nice and early since I had a night to do nothing but Mythic Plus, basically. No, I think I got maybe like a couple points because I did a couple dungeons a little faster than I had done before. But like, I'm not pushing rating. I'm at Resilient 13. All my scoring dungeons are 13s. I'm doing 12s. I'm doing 10s or 11s, depending on who I'm playing with. Like, I'm getting pretty close to being done with Gilded Crest at this point. I think I need to. I have one ring slot that I don't have Myth Track anyway, and I need to like fish up a better ring from somewhere at some point. I need to recraft my bracers, so I need a handful of crests for that. And then I have a crafted weapon currently, and I think what I'm going to end up doing is actually, as much as it pains me to do so, is spending some of my chips on the one-handed weapon from Mythic Plexus Sentinel. It's the best. It's a pretty good weapon overall in terms of stats. It's the highest I have access to. I'm not going to kill any other bosses probably. And I might not even kill this boss again, or at least for a long time. So it's not like, oh, I'll wait for a drop or I'll wait for vault because I don't know. It's not going to be happening. So it feels kind of bad to do that, but I guess at least it's something productive to do. I don't need trinkets or anything. I have a really good trinket set up. So it seems like maybe that's what I end up doing. And then so once those pieces are done, then I'm done with Gilded Crests. Other than that, I've been doing I did some delves this week on the alts, trying to keep that going. The key acquisition, I've kind of split it up into like I have a day where I just do the key acquisition, and man, that stinks. Like, just let me do the bountifuls if they're up, right? Like, I don't. Maybe that's a thing for midnight. We can get rid of the idea of the coffer keys. Like, there's 4 bountifuls a day. Do them. Get your champ gear. Like, who cares? But delves, I think the system is fun, and I enjoy the moment to moment of doing them. It's the buildup of I have to get keys on many different characters in order to get the best rewards I can. Monk and Druid still each need one stupid piece of hero track gear that they just can't seem to get. I will say whatever was going on with Bran last week that I was talking about is still happening, which is fantastic. Sometimes Hatterang goes out and all the bars on the screen just disappear. So thanks, Bran. Keep that up. That's very much appreciated. We did see some changes with Turbo Boost coming in this week to Delves, and I got to say, for me, they felt pretty minor. The extra 10 Gilded Crests is nice. That's certainly appreciated as well. I think I got so far I've done maybe about 15 or so delves this week, something like that. And I got one piece of Warbound champ gear, I think, maybe one or two. So the Warbound champ gear they added is not like raining from the sky. I am doing 9s. I'll do my 11s for Gildeds, and I'll do 9s instead of 8s. I haven't gotten any of the warp splinters, whatever they're called, that recharge your catalyst from delves. I got one from Mythic Plus earlier this week, but nothing from delves, even in that 9 to 11 range. And man, the vendor that sells the hero track trinkets is kind of disappointing, because I'm finding that the spam delves I'm doing, the 9s, they give about 8 or 9 of the currency that you need to buy a trinket. The trinkets cost 100 of those. So you're looking at, 12 to 14 or so, depending on how you luck out with how many of them actually drop. Bountifuls, you have to do bountifuls because they only come out of the bountiful cache in order to be able to afford a trinket. And it seems like the trinket vendor's inventory rotates on a daily basis. So there's one particular hero track trinket I'd like to get on my monk. It was on the inventory yesterday. I finished the week short of the amount of currency that I needed. I'm not going to do bountiful delves just specifically for that. That's even more keys I need to obtain somehow. What a mess. Why not just have all of the trinkets on the vendor? But what I'm saying is delve trinkets continue to mystify me. I don't understand how any of this works. And even this, which should have been cool, doesn't feel super user friendly. I was not happy about that yesterday. It was like, oh, the foot bomb dispenser's on the guy. Sweet. Oh wait, I only have 70 of the things. Oh no, I'm only going to do 2 or 3 more delves. It's not going to be enough things to buy it today. Well, I guess we'll see what happens next week. Yeah. Anyway, that's my little complaint about that. I wish that was a little more streamlined, or just put the vendor outside the delve or something and have the full inventory on it.
I don't get not having the vendor up in Dornegal like that. Like they have the delve area with the Adventurers Guild. Just put the vendor there as part of the Adventurers Guild. It just makes sense.
Yeah, and you can only get the hero track currency from 9s and above. So it's not like, I don't know. It's not like something where, it's a reward for doing a higher tier delve, right? Like the reward is the currency at that point. So, that was that. We talked last week about Hallow's End. I think I was in the middle of some stuff, but I ended up I think later that day I just went and trick-or-treated and I got the 2 new swords. So I haven't been doing anything with Hallow's End other than Daily Headless Horseman. Still don't have the new mount, unfortunately. I hope I get it, because the whole Mog set with the shield and the one-hander looks awesome. The mount would really cap it off. We still got a week left, so hopefully I didn't get it today, but fingers crossed it pops up this week.
Yeah,
and then
it's wild. We're almost through October, man. It's wild.
I know. I don't know. I mean, this entire year, but this month especially just really flew by. I mean, I've had a lot of stuff going on outside of game and whatever else, but geez. And then, Remix, just trying to dip a toe, trying to keep some stuff going. I just haven't really had the kind of time that I would like, even though I don't love Remix, but it feels like the thing to do. I'm starting to get a little bit up there. Your item level starts stacking up. The higher it gets, the more you get higher item level stuff, which continues to push your item level. I'm only about 640, but I mean, I jumped about 15, 20 item levels this week with minimal play. Still just chasing those knowledge points. I know some new ones came out with phase 2, but I didn't finish all the phase 1 knowledge. So I still need a couple world bosses. I think I need 2 more to finish up that one. And then I got to finish up High Mountain. I got to get into Suramar. I'm trying not to do any kind of big grind until I get as much knowledge as possible, because it feels like just the way to maximize the time spent doing that, so you get the most power per activity. And there's no substitute for doing all the questing and stuff and the world bosses. You're just waiting on the daily rotation. So I don't know. I think Remix is part of the reason why I've had raid attendance struggles and people checking out. Some people are choosing Remix over raid night. But I think also once you start losing momentum, that becomes an easier choice to make as well. It's like, well, if we're just doing this, then I'm going to play Remix instead. And so, yeah, I think the timing on the Remix release was just terrible. It was much different in Dragonflight when it was stepping on the toes of the end of Season 4 versus here where it's stepping on the toes of the middle of Season 3, which is not a Season 4 and is, an actual season and has been kind of truncated in some ways by this release.
I would go farther and say that the part of losing momentum, a large part of losing momentum, was delaying Turbo Boost and having the first week not actually be the week where they uncap Cress and let you push and let you do things, because that was the window of time for people to really sort of lock in and do the farm and do the gather and enjoy the cycle of starting to sort of power your character up again. Whereas now we've essentially over the last 2 weeks just seen the steady decline in active participants, especially with your team, in the live game, and them shifting over to Remix. And I think a lot of that just came from there isn't a lot to do in the live game outside of the rating thing at that moment, right? It's because you're still capped on Crest, so you logged in, you upgrade some pieces a little bit more, and then there was nothing else that was really new or to engage you with Turbo Boost. Whereas now, obviously, this past week, there was you could have chain run as many Mythic Plus as you wanted and just super powered up a character and done the things you wanted to do. But I feel like that's just a few weeks too late from where it should have been for locking people in that playtime and locking people into that power gain. I just think it was a mistake to do the delayed release.
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand why that was the move. And also, like, to piggyback off of that thought, like, you also didn't get that immediate kind of positive reinforcement of like, look at how much my power went up and look at how this content feels now, right? Which, in addition to like, oh, I have more motivation to go do stuff because there's stuff to acquire. I mean, the difference was palpable this week with, an entire, dungeon group or whatever being 4 or 5 or more equipped item levels higher than they were last week. I mean, it seems like a small number, but that's actually a pretty significant power gain, especially across an entire group. So, I think, delaying that stuff and not having that positive reinforcement and that big power spike come in, it just made it seem like it didn't matter in a lot of ways. And, it's tough right now. I think the thing for me is to just kind of reset my expectations. We're just ramping it down, and I'm just gonna, if we can pick some people up and we can keep stuff rolling, cool. I'm happy to do it. I'm interested in doing it. And if we can't, then we're just, closing up shop. We'll tamp it down for the rest of the expansion. We'll keep a weekly raid night going, and I'll do keys where I can, but it's not really what I want to be doing in WoW. But I also, there's not more drastic steps that I'm willing to take to get to where I want to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
This is just, we're just going to maintain then, if that's the case.
Yeah, totally get that. Okay, let's hop into what's going on this week because we got plenty to talk about. All right, this week in World of Warcraft is the Delves bonus event, meaning the sign of the Explorer buff is up, increasing Delver's journey progress gains by 25%, companion experience by 25%, and undercoin gains by 25%. There's also a quest to complete 5 Delves, which rewards you with a Delver's Spoils Champion cache, this champion eye-level loot out of that cache for completing 5 of them. So be sure you're getting your Delves in. This is a nice little overlap week if you chose Delves as any of the other previous rewards that existed out there, as well as the Delver's Week being one of the quests that's up there. I believe it's the last week for Delver's Week before we go into another round of it. So be sure you do that if you have not done it yet.
Yeah, nice synergy this week because I think it's a disc fragments week. So This is a perfect way to get them. 5 for a champ cache is a little. It's a little rough.
This is an awkward number. It's an awkward number.
Yeah, it doesn't line up with anything else. But the extra undercoin is really nice, I think. Because that's the thing that you kind of never stop spending. There's some cosmetics and one-time stuff to buy with it, but then you always want it for quartz or you want it for extra keys or whatever. So a chance to get more of that is really big. I mean, obviously, if you're behind on Devil's Journey or Brand XP, then this is great for that. But we're also like pretty far into the season. So, and I think we had one other Devil's bonus event already this season. So, that might be less of a bonus for a lot of people, but man, the extra undercoin is really nice. I feel like undercoin's a bit stingy for how much stuff costs. So
yeah,
it's getting a little more bang for our buck on that this week is great.
Yep. As far as I guess the Turbo Boost week goes, one of the things I took advantage of was I'd been doing my Koresh weeklies for quite a while, which means I'd progressed that reputation quite far, and I had not collected the rewards. So I was able to go to the rep vendor and just collect a whole bunch of Valor Stones and a whole bunch of crests and whatnot that I had sort of sitting and waiting for me as turn-ins. So if you're someone who's still working on the rep for Koresh Trust, be sure you take advantage of that and think about, hey, you know what, a great way to get Valor Stones isn't just doing World Quest to get Valor Stones from World Quest, but also I can progress this reputation and then get, the Valor Stone turn-in coins that they give you that you can redeem for more Valor Stones. So that was a really great way to help with my boost right off the bat, is all those reps. Maybe there's an older rep you haven't taken advantage of. Be sure you go back, do that older rep in this expansion, and you will have, again, those turn-ins and those benefits as well. So keep that in mind.
Also, they're warbound now. So if you have a tune you don't care about gearing or whatever, that you can get into War Within content, you can just go around to all those renowned vendors and just send all the Valor Stones over to the tune that you're actively gearing. I haven't hit that point because I do enough stuff that I usually have enough Valor Stones to float me, but like that is a thing you can do. Hey, you could move a time runner over even, right? Like level it to 80 in time running, and then go around to all the rep vendors, get all your free Valor Stone caches, and then just warband transfer them to somebody else.
Yeah, that's absolutely a possibility. So take advantage. As Jason mentioned, it is Titan Disc Fragment Week. So this is collecting 100 of these fragments from rares, treasures, dungeon bosses, and delves. Delves being the most successful way to get them, as just the most efficient time per reward of disc fragments. So like 3 delves and you're done kind of idea. So take advantage of that while you can. Shadowpan Showdown is this week in Brawls, provided the Brawl rotation is correct or still working or hasn't shut down or broken. Shadowpan Showdown is a really cool one. It is Tiger's Peak Arena. You control the sort of like the center control point, and there's 2 large NPC bosses that fight each other, and you have to try and defeat the other team's boss while they're trying to defeat yours, and it's very fun. So be sure you have a good time in Shadowpan Showdown if it's up and running and working.
Yeah, and this was one that was out of the rotation for a really long time. I think it spent like an entire expansion or something out of the rotation because it was busted. So your results may vary when you queue into something this week. But yeah, it's a cool take. It's like it's not like sort of a pure PvP mode, right? Like there's that PvE element to a bigger degree than something like Cooking Impossible even, right? Like you sort of have that gathering and there's some stuff to do in there, which is cool and a little bit of a different style. And this is sort of in that realm. So, which is cool. I like this kind of stuff better than, hey, here's something familiar with a slight twist on the rules. This is like a different mode unto itself, basically.
Yeah. Okay, as far as Mythic Plus affixes go, we are looking at a Devour week. This is the quota week, basically. So players are periodically afflicted with a healing quota in combat that can be dispelled off of the players or can be healed through. At this stage, it is not too bad to heal through it with all the turbo boost and stuff that's been going on for people, but it is still nice. If you're a player, I would say, that doesn't have to like massively respec in order to get a dispel. If you're a mage who can decurse, if you're a druid who can, throw out a poison cleanse, if you're a paladin or a priest who can get something that can just remove any debuff whatsoever, you can help out your healer by just dispelling these things off. It's really nice when you get into a group where everyone's actively doing it as a healer. So literally it pops up, you dispel one person and you watch all like 3 of the other ones vanish and you're like, oh my goodness. Okay, well my thing's going to be off cooldown with plenty of time to dispel that one last person. Perfect. That's great. It also lets me save my dispel for an actual important debuff that's going to like kill somebody. So that to me is really nice, and it lets me save my healing cooldowns, so I don't have to try and heal through it. Although, like I said, that's become a lot easier lately. So Devour Week is what folks are looking at if you're doing something lower than 12s, and I think people who are pushing for their 12s, like we're getting to that point where you should, with Turbo Boost, be able to get geared enough to be doing some 12s and getting the rewards that you want to start getting off of the cartel chip vendor, which is still weird to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, just the power gain is so substantial at this point. Yeah, this has been the easiest season of the expansion as well. Obviously, there are people still shooting for different goals within the system or whatever, but everything is on the table for you now, right? You can get gildeds at lower difficulties, and then you can get to a pretty high item level from spending your gildeds. You can get as many gildeds as you want at this point. Um, yeah, this combo is okay. Devour should be, I mean, like you said, at this point in the season, it should be less of a hurdle because just with stats being what they are, the healing that you have to do to pop the debuff should be within range. You just have to pay attention to it. And yeah, as you mentioned too, like anything you can do to preserve your healer's dispel for something more important than the affix is super helpful. So bring some self heals, talent into that awkward thing you have to get in your tree that lets you pop this or whatever. And yeah, just respect the dispel cooldown, right? Because there's some stuff that you don't want hanging out that's going to be ultimately more punishing than the devour debuff itself. But like you don't want enemies healing, and you don't want to miss out on that big extra crit. So
yeah,
it's all about teamwork. Just a big thing you can do for this week is just set up your build. This is sort of a be prepared, type of week in terms of what you're bringing into a dungeon.
Exactly. Okay, Hallow's End. It is ending on November 1st, so this is your last chance this week to get the Headless Horseman rewards, which are the Ghoulish Armors and Blades and Bulwark, as well as the Ghoulish Charger through queuing for the Headless Horseman, and also just getting out there to the vendor rewards, which are the Blades and the Bulwark. Sorry, the Headless Horseman is Armor and Charger. The vendor is Blades and Bulwark. So get your tricky treats, buy up all the new stuff. If you're still lacking in old stuff, there's lots of old stuff too, tons and tons of stuff with this event. And be sure you're trick-or-treating all over the place. You can go to Kazalgar, you can go to Dornogal, you can go to like every single major city throughout all of the expansions. We'll have tricky treats that you can go to, all of the little tiny... I remember I used to like fly all the way down one continent, then fly all the way down and just do flight points, which was the easiest way for me to do it. Now people have, using add-ons, they have the sort of like waypoints that you can put in. So if you're using an add-on that lets you put down waypoints, people can have pre-programmed waypoints where essentially you just go, here's a route, and then you just fly that route all the way down through the continent until you've sort of, efficiently gotten all of your tricky treats. It does take hours to do. So just, set aside the time. If you're like, hey, let's watch a spooky movie tonight, let's maybe have that on a TV while you have World of Warcraft open and you're just flying around getting tricky treats. That's a great activity to do. Is definitely how I tend to do it. So be sure that you are getting advantage of that and getting all your rewards purchased up before this goes away.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff to buy if you're behind, but there it is pretty grindable. There's a ton of candy buckets these days. I mean, we got 2 new continents in the last couple years, so if you need to make a last minute push, it's all there. Obviously, it's like per character, so you could take multiple alts through, and you could do it pretty much. It's not like there's any danger involved. You can get a bunch just from trick or treating. You usually get, I guess, you get 2 or 3 per handful from a candy bucket. So, yeah, it's just like there's too much on the vendor to start from 0 and get everything in 1 year at this point. But you can zero in on stuff you really like, and if there's anything you want in particular, you can definitely get it. Even just with this week, right? If you're willing to do enough trick or treating and even the initial questing and stuff, you can get a nice handful of tricky treats to get started. I think you can get about 40 just from doing the intro stuff, and
right.
Then you can start trick or treating from there. So, I mean, yeah, we're already into that last week. I think it ends Saturday. I think at 2 p.m. Eastern. So there should be like a quick window for one more Headless Horseman potentially. That's what the calendar says right now, but sometimes that stuff doesn't line up with what actually happens. So hopefully they leave it on through Saturday reset. But yeah, and also hopefully for me, I won't need that one last shot at Horseman by then. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Super cool event. I mean, I love the theming on it. There's so much cool stuff to get from the vendors. And yeah, I think that this year's additions to it were good. The way the armor works from Headless Horseman is awesome. How like you always get a piece that you don't have until you have the full set. That is incredible, and the set looks great. And the new the shield and the new weapons look great with the set, and they're not really that hard to get. So I think this year's updates were awesome, and just for myself, just hoping I can get that mount before it's all said and done.
Yeah. Day of the Dead is coming up. That is going to be November 1st to 3rd. This is the yearly event that takes place in Stormwind is where I tend to go to it, but it's located in a couple of different places. I think it's Stormwind and Orgrimmar. And you can go there and get yourself the Contenders costume, as well as the different costumes they have. The different toys for them as well, with the Snowy Owl and Santos Sun and Purple Phantom, Night Demon, Blooming Rose. There's a whimsical skull mask helm that you can get with a bouquet of marigolds for an offhand. And it's just this is like their first stab at micro holiday stuff when they were doing it back in the day. Although now it's sort of grown into being a bit more, because they even have like the Cliffside Wilder Drake has Day of the Dead Drake armor, which is very cool for people to check out and pick up. And yeah, you want to bring some flour and ice cold milk to complete the quest of the Grateful Dead to earn the Macabre Marionette Battle Pet. That's part of this as well. So lots of permanent rewards, even though this is only for a couple of days. There's lots of permanent rewards for character if you're looking to get some toys and costumes and Drake armor and whatnot.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff, like the kind of Lucha Libre theme stuff for the Contenders costumes and all that. Yeah, it's a weird one because it's been around for a long time. It like predates micro holidays, and it has permanent account rewards, but it really functions kind of more like a micro holiday. I checked today. As I was putting notes together, you can, if you have the orange marigold offhand, you can mog that now, but you cannot mog the whimsical skull mask still unless the holiday's active, which is weird because they've loosened up a lot of those rules, and this is such a short holiday. But it is, that one is still linked to it. The Day of the Dead Drake armor is really cool. I don't know if there's anything new this year. That's off my radar right now, so we'll see. This is something that they haven't updated a lot, but obviously they did update in Dragonflight, so it may not be due for anything else since it's a little one, but it's cool. It's a nice nod to the real world holiday. So check it out if you've never done it. There's some cool stuff to collect. Yeah.
All right, Darkmoon Fair is also going to be kicking off, not for a couple of weeks, but it's going to be on the 7th of November to be the following Saturday. So it'll be the 7th to the 14th is what it 7th to the 13th is what it's going to be. So be sure that you are taking advantage of Darkmoon Fair when it kicks off and just sort of planning it out. Sometimes people are a little unsure as to when the first Sunday falls. No, this isn't correct. It is actually going to be the 2nd into the 8th is what it's going to be.
Yeah, sorry, I was a typo. It starts. Yeah, it's going to start a week from today. So
yeah, so we got that. Good. Okay, so yes, so it is starting during the next week. It's not a couple weeks out. It is starting on the 2nd and running until the 8th. So be sure that you are getting your knowledge points, your extra experience and reputation gain, doing the achievements you want to get done, buying your dirigible, collecting up. I just pool Darkmoon Fair tokens for when they do release, because I feel like there's going to be like a 5,000 Darkmoon Fair tokens for building your own giant mech or something crazy, right?
Someday, or some decor thing or something. Yeah. That would be a nice
the decor,
Darkmoon ticket sync,
Yeah. Do you want a large eyeball mirror that stares at you everywhere you go? You can put this up on your wall. Yeah, like that kind of thing would be, like I can see that happening. So I just pool tokens so that when it happens, I can be like, yes, I'm buying up all these things. So yes, be sure that that you are taking advantage when you can of the Darkmoon Fair. Okay, notable hot fixes. So they are still updating live game and doing a lot of hot fixes, and as you can expect with the launch of Turbo Boost as well as the launch of Remix, there's a lot of things they're hot fixing because those are both counted as the live game at the moment. So, Unholy Death Knights, there was an issue that was causing Sand Lane to grant all Gift of Sand Lane associated buffs, again, when resummoning your pet ghoul, and that has been resolved. So you are no longer getting all of the buffs that you should not be getting whenever you summon your ghoul. So if that was happening previously for you and you were kind of counting on that DPS increase, it's gone. I apologize. So that's a thing. The Hollow's End...
Sorry, DKs, but not that sorry. Yeah. Like, a little bit sorry.
The Hollow's End Magic Broom was unable to fly this past week, and they have actually allowed it to take to the skies once again. So that got hotfixed in, so people can use their magic broom. I know this is very important to a lot of people because they like the instant mounting, and it's just such a big deal during this event to be able to do that. So yeah, definitely take advantage of that when you can. The user interface, several abilities have been added as options to the tracked buffs and tracked bars in the cooldown manager. This is a noticeable thing. If you haven't looked at this thing in a little while, there are additional abilities added in there, and it's interesting they don't list them, but there are, so check. So if you were like, man, this would be so much better if it actually had this thing in it that was tracked, it might actually be tracked now. You might want to go check to see what's there.
Yeah, some nice additions here, actually. I checked in on this after this hotfix came out because I was able to throw Avatar and Last Stand in there, which are buffs that I want to track. I have, like I mentioned last couple episodes, I've been using the cooldown manager buff tracking and trying to train myself off of my weak auras that were tracking stuff like shield block and ignore pain. And it's going pretty well. I think overall, like, I don't notice that much of a difference. They're not as robust as what I had before, but
yeah,
it gives me enough. I know enough to know when I need to push a button, which is the main thing. And I wasn't using like buff trackers before. So this is information I have that I didn't have. I wasn't presenting to myself previously in this form. And so, yeah, now I have Avatar and Last Stand in the mix too. I had Shield Wall and Spell Reflection when it first came in, and now I got these other two big buffs to keep track of, which is cool. Of course, Last Stand is changing dramatically in Midnight, so it'll be short-lived. But hey, for now, I have it, and yeah, it's nice. It was kind of weird that they weren't there because they're kind of big cooldowns, you know? So it was weird that they weren't trackable when the patch came out, but it's nice that they threw some more stuff in there and just gives you more options to, you know, just have info presented to you while you're in combat.
Yeah. In Legion Remix, there was a whole bunch of hotfixes that came through in this and fixing little things, but they also went in and resolved a couple of things we want to mention. One is the Postmaster will now recover fragmented mementos of Epoch challenges. So yeah, if you weren't getting those before, they're actually recovered, which is really nice. That made a big difference. They also fixed an issue where starting but not finishing the Legion intro quest line could prevent players from continuing their Order Hall campaign. Yeah, I something like this, it just completely prevents progress, which is ugly. So I'm very happy that, like, oh, dinner was ready in the middle of this intro quest line, so I logged out, and then I came back after dinner and logged in, and I just couldn't complete the quest line and couldn't progress forward. That sucks. So yeah, I'm very happy that that's fixed and resolved for players as well. And then while running a time-worn Keystone, Eternus will grant players the following buffs depending on their role. Gift of Eternus, Slayer. Eternus grants damage dealers 10% increased damage, 100% increased health, and 33% decreased damage taken. Gift of the Savior. Eternus grants healers 10% increased damage, 10% increased healing, and absorbs 100% increased health and 33% decreased damage taken. And Eternus, Gift of the Protector, grants 10% increased healing received from other players. So that's a big buff that you can get from doing Keystones, so just keep that in mind. That is certainly going to help you get through those Keystones and do the higher keys as well.
Yeah, this is really nice, I think. I mean, I played very little.
Yeah, I haven't touched
Remix this week.
Yeah.
And I've done very little Mythic Plus and Remix overall. I've done none since this came in. But I mean, one thing we were initially hearing was like, well, tanks are too strong. Tanks are just the default choice. You should be playing a tank spec because it's the only way to survive some of this content, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like doubling health and cutting damage taken in a third should help immensely for non-tank specs and Keystones. So that should help you get those rewards that you're looking for and just spend your time efficiently in that content. I mean, it's kind of the whole point of a remix mode, right? Is that sort of time efficiency of like, I put a little bit of time in and I get a lot of reward out.
Yeah.
So I think this is more along the lines of what people were looking for with the changes to non-tank specs. Was it's not really the damage going out, it's the health pools and the damage coming in.
Yeah, you don't want to feel like everyone's a glass cannon, for sure. Level 80 time runners will now receive fragmented mementos of Epoch challenges as loot from world bosses, rares, the daily kind that spawn, and emissary quests. So those are the type of things that, you know, now will also appear in your mailbox if you forget to loot them or don't loot them or have a full inventory or whatever it is. Something bugs out, so they will show up in your mailbox now. The completing the following content with heroic world tier enabled will reward higher quantities of fragmented mementos, that's world bosses, and your daily rares. So if you do those, you will get even more fragmented mementos than you previously were. So this is very good news because it helps people gather all the mementos much faster. So I'm happy to see this stuff. This is the type of thing that we want to see continuing throughout the process of Legion Remix so that it just keeps ramping and ramping and ramping towards the end to help people get what they want to get out of it and can just enjoy the content and not stress over like doing the most efficient thing to get the most efficient stuff. That is not as enjoyable as, hey, look at this crazy fun remix thing I'm a part of where I'm earning tons and tons of power and currency that will allow me to buy everything I want to buy. So yeah, I'd much rather be in a situation where there's 2 weeks left of Legion and I don't have anything left to buy than there's 2 weeks left of Legion and I'm trying to optimize every minute that I spend in it to make sure I can buy everything I want to.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm hoping, especially considering my sort of lack of sweatiness around Legion Remix so far, I feel like the way it's structured is sort of to have that tail where, you know, there will be some kind of boost or buff or catch up, and that we'll have a decent amount of time to go through and just collect and power up, even if you weren't out of the gate just zooming to max item level and stuff. I hope so. And it's kind of the way that they initially sold it, but obviously plans change a lot once players start getting into stuff. So we'll see. But I do think that those are good changes. I'm sort of in the mode. I mean, I mentioned it at top of show, but like my main concern still is getting infinite knowledge. And along the way, I'm like powering up a bit. But I feel like once I get kind of to the top end of that infinite knowledge, then it'll be time to do stuff like throw on heroic world tier and, do world bosses and rares for mementos to start getting that higher level power. That's sort of, it seems like a good way to encourage some variety of gameplay too, right? Like obviously things like raids are an efficient way to spend time in the game to get power and to get rewards, but there's a broad menu of stuff in Legion, and I think they want to make everything have a place in that, right? It shouldn't just be like, oh, well, log on and just do all the raids and then log into your other character and do all the raids. Like, yeah, that'll probably still win out in the end in terms of overall efficiency, but like, you don't have to. If there's a long enough timeline and the rewards are good enough as you scale up, then you can have all of these other things that are possible, to participate in and still feel rewarded for. And I think that's what some of these changes are sort of leaning into.
Yeah. All right. Well, with the PTR up and running for 11.2.7, it means that Brawlers Guild is now available for testing. So be sure that you are hopping in there if you're looking to actually test out some of the new brawls. You can go to the Brawlgar Arena in Orgrimmar or Bismo's Brawl Pub in Deep Run Tram and just start playing around with some brawls and just seeing what it's like and doing the challenges and getting the rewards for housing decor and all that kind of stuff is all testable. So be sure you are participating and checking that out before the release of this, which I'm assuming we're only, like 3 to 4 weeks away from, man. Like it can't be that far off for the 11.2.7, man. It's got to be coming.
I think it's probably, my thought is probably second week of December. I think we're about a month out.
Okay.
Because that would be about 2 months out from the last one, right? Because the current patch came out on October 7th. So about 8 weeks out would be about December 2nd, maybe December 9th, somewhere in there. And so, yeah, we got a couple weeks left. But yeah, it's kind of a substantial .7. There's going to be a bunch of stuff to do. If you want to do it, it's not sort of like tied directly into, there's like big top line objectives for the rest of season 3 or Metaforge Omega to do, but it's, some nice variety kind of content to check out while we're moving into, we'll really be in that pre-expansion phase at that point. But, yeah, that's kind of what I think what we're looking like. And of course, this is also going to bring in housing early access, which is going to completely shift the whole landscape of what World of Warcraft even is, I think.
Yeah, they also said that tooltips for housing decor, and this is on PTR, items in bags, and the house chests now display the item quality color. So if you have that legendary decor item, it'll have a certain color versus the rare or common or uncommon or standard, I guess is the bottom one, versions of those items. So I think that's interesting. I hadn't really considered housing items having like quality appearance and having like that standard sort of color setting based off of the rarity of it or the importance of it or the impact of it or the difficulty to accomplish it or achieve it. But yeah, that's a thing that's going to be in there. So I presume, they will have some pretty wild and crazy housing stuff that's farther up the item quality color tree.
You would think so, yeah. You'd think the higher quality ones would be more elaborate or something, right? But also having just color-coded tooltips like other items make it easier to sort or easier to pick something out, So that's just good. It's just another way to kind of present the info. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it also probably, yeah, the source of where the stuff comes from, I would think. You probably, I'm thinking of like Oni's head is probably purple quality, right? But like a table that you get from a vendor for, order resources or something is probably green or whatever.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about assigning quality to them, but they're doing it. So we're going to see what that all looks like for sure. And then you'll have people fighting over being like, Oni's head should be legendary. What are you talking about? This is so cool. And it's like original. And oh my God. And that's, well, okay. Maybe there's an Oni's head that has like that's a rarer one to get. Maybe you get a purple epic one, or there's a low chance to get the legendary one to drop that spits fire every now and then or whatever. Like, I don't know. That might be something cool they do too, man. I don't know.
That would be a cool down the road thing. Like, hey, I don't know, for WoW's 25th anniversary or something, we'll do a special Oni trophy you can get that has some kind of other VFX on it or something. That would actually be really neat if they had that. I think over time, like I don't think we need stuff like that out of the gate, but man, that would be a really cool way for housing to kind of go and decor to go over the years is add those twists on items or tie them to other events or milestones in the game. It's like a new version of a familiar thing. They've done that with many other elements of WoW, right? So decor is just like a new concept for WoW, but it could easily hook into those kind of things that we've seen with like mounts or whatever over the years.
Yeah. Alpha entered a new phase of testing where you can now create an 88 level character with as a template character with the maximum level moving up to 90, which is the maximum level. So you will not see levels going higher than that. Housing had to be disabled though, so we currently can't play around with housing, but you can still jump into 3 of the new dungeons, including Magister's Terrace, if you haven't checked that one out, and see what the new version of that looks like, as well as some of the delves. There's 2 new delves for you to check out. And there's obviously the improvements, like one of the big things for me is sounds for cooldown alerts can now be previewed by clicking on the music icon and right of the sound name. Basically, the sound preview is going to be for cooldown manager. So the cooldown manager now is going to have sound alerts, which I think is really important. Here's the big thing for me. When I was tasked, this is going a little ways back to Legion. Speaking of Legion Remix, going a little ways back to Legion. When I joined Death Jesters and started raiding with them mythic content, one of the first things, like I was making a leap. I hadn't been raiding in a little while. I knew that they were looking for a Resto Druid. I did not have the resume, if you will, of someone who recently had been participating in recent content at a mythic rating level that would get me into the team. But I knew Sparty, and Sparty knew me and knew that I would put in a lot of work. And so he put together an interview where I could sit down and chat with a couple of their officers. And the officers gave me some feedback of, okay, this is what we'd want to see like really early on from you. And so I raided with them and I got my first round of feedback. And one of the first things I got was, you're not using life bloom enough. I want to see your life bloom percentage up a lot more. And so my life bloom percentage, I think at the time was like 49 or 51% or something was my uptime on it. And back then I built a weak aura, and that weak aura is that it will play a gunshot sound if my life bloom is not active on a target. and it will repeat that sound every 1 second until I apply Life Bloom to that target. That was my fix. And so I went from a 49% uptime in 1 week to the next week I had a 98%, 99% uptime on Life Bloom, because no one wants a repeating gunshot sound in their ears when they're trying to do a raid boss. So you just, or a dungeon or anything. So you just maintain that uptime so that you just never have to deal with that, right? And that is to me a very specific but also very clear case of I needed a tool that I needed to be customized for my play to improve my play, and this was the best way to do it. So what I need from Cooldown Manager is I need to be able to select things like Life Bloom, for example, and go, I need this to track what it is doing on a target, so on one of my teammates, and when this enters pandemic range, I need it to alert me in some way that I need to refresh Life Bloom. And I need it to do that all the time regularly. And I need to be able to set up sound alerts for it. I need to be able to set up all these things. And I don't know if that fits into Cooldown Manager, but it's got to fit in somewhere. Because if you're going to take away weak auras, it'd be very, for me, I know it'd be very detrimental to my play to lose those sorts of reminders that I've built for myself over the years that go, hey, while you're managing these other 12 things, including movement and not standing in mechanics and et cetera, be sure you're maintaining these HOTS all of the time. And so I need sound alerts, and I like to see that they're adding sound alerts to the Cooldown Manager. My fear when we talk about, you know, the removal of add-ons and the restrictions on add-ons, particularly during in-combat situations, is they need to build solutions for those situations like I just described. Of, hey, I'm maintaining HOTS on numerous targets at the same time. I have numerous HOTS to maintain on those targets. I'm also dealing with raid mechanics at the same time. I'm also dealing with triaging damage that's coming in from players who shouldn't be having player damage the way they are. And I might be doing dispels or having some other special job that I'm doing. I don't want my Life Bloom to fall off a target for 8 seconds. I want to be sure Life Bloom is on that target with no more than 2 or 3 seconds of downtime before it is refreshed on that target. So I need the way for the UI to tell me or give me the option for me to enable a way for the UI to tell me that I need to be maintaining this thing, because otherwise it's going to slip. And you're going to see things like my efficiency as a raider will go down because I can't track that thing anymore and I can't do that thing anymore. And so when I see these changes, I'm like, yay, good. They're adding in sounds. They're adding in these things that I want. I'm really happy to see that. But they really need to make this, like, to take this idea and just blow it up huge and go, okay, we should add every spell that people might want to track to the Cooldown Manager. So if you want to track Life Bloom, and every time you cast it, it means that you've now cast it, so it now has started a cooldown timer, and that cooldown timer will warn you when there's 2 seconds left before that Life Bloom would deteriorate. Great, that's fine. I have no issue with that. That's a way to do that, so I can actually have a sound alert happen because it knows that Life Bloom lasts 10 seconds, and so at 2 seconds remaining, 8 seconds into me casting it, it warns me. That's fine. But you need to have something like that, and I just, I'm hoping that happens, man. I'm hoping that happens.
Yeah, I feel like, I feel like there's been community solutions for sound alerts for something happening in combat, and for the purposes of this discussion, specifically with like your character's status or spells, right?
Yeah.
Cooldown is up. I don't know, a dot or a hot is about to expire, whatever, for a really long time, and it's just now that Blizzard is like, okay, well, what if we incorporated this into the baseline game? It's good. It's a great thing to have. This kind of leads us into sort of a broader discussion, but it's like, at what point is it like, well, this has to be at least as good as the stuff that it's intended to replace. And, I don't think it's going to be there immediately here. It's good that they're including it. I think it's something the game, they probably should have included a really long time ago. This should not be a new feature baseline in 2026, I assume, by the time that this ships. And I'm sure out of the box, it's not going to be as robust and as customizable as what people are accustomed to who rely on, add-ons that do sound alerts. So, we'll see how it shapes up. I mean, there's a long road in front of us as players and for the development team in terms of some of these changes. But like, these are things that they need to put in the game baseline, right? Like, let's get them in first, and then we can complain about how they don't work as good as we want them to, and then hopefully they can continue to add functionality and changes. We've seen some great changes to cooldown manager in the live game in this expansion. It still has a long way to go. Next expansion, we're going to see some more changes that are great functionality to add and are going to need further changes. Yeah. So it's one step at a time, but I'm glad that they're in there and you can actually preview the sounds. Like, I guess prior to this, I haven't played alpha in a couple of weeks. I played before sound alerts were enabled, and I haven't played in between here. So I guess like you didn't know what it was going to sound like because there was no preview. So you just had to like assign it something and then wait to see what it sounded like once you're in combat. That's probably not great. So having the preview window helps a lot. So you can set something up and then you know what to expect. That just seems natural.
Yeah. They also, I don't know how helpful this is to people, but they talked about add-on security changes where they're like, add-ons are now allowed to pass text containing secret values into our text-to-speech APIs and these sorts of things that I assume are opening up the way. So add a way for add-ons to colorize unit frame health bars in combat base based on health of the unit. So this now allows people's health bars to turn red or whatever it is when someone drops below a certain value of health, that kind of thing. Because their goal is to still allow you to skin all of this stuff. So they still have like made various quality of life changes to add-on spell, cooldown, faction, and aura APIs. And it's just like, all right, I don't know what you're doing, but you're doing something that is, allowing more access to some of the add-on stuff than what was restricted before. So we'll dig into that pretty much right now. This is a blog that came out this week that I wanted to be sure we covered in today's show, called How Midnight's Upcoming Game Changes Will Impact Combat Add-ons. And Jason very pointedly said before the show started, where was this before they started making any of the announcements of, where was this blog post before they started making the announcements that they've made around add-ons and changing add-ons and what's going to happen at midnight? Because it's
or before the first alpha build hit, right? Because we knew the first we kind of said it, I think, on the show, like, well, we assume that they're starting with the most restrictive so they can set a baseline and they're going to open stuff up from there, and that is what they've been doing. But there was no statement of intent about that other than like, oh, add-ons are going to be changing, please see this video we released in May or whatever it was, right? And and then it's just been like, well, we're kind of working under this assumption. We're seeing these changes come in here and there, but there hasn't really been a statement of intent or like where they want to settle until this week.
Yeah. So here's the chunks of the post that I want to be sure we're reading. They say, we began our alpha with the most restrictive version of our logic in place, ensuring that we were fully addressing add-ons' ability to provide in-combat competitive advantage. So like, as Jason just said, this was the assumption I was operating under. This is the assumption we were operating under when we talked about it on the show, is we think they locked everything down so tight because they were going to then open little doorways here and there to try and accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. But that trying to slowly peel stuff back was way harder than just shutting stuff down and slowly opening things back up. So they're going about it that way. And that's basically how they start the sentence, which is why we're like, you should have posted this before alpha. All right. But we did so with the expectation that feedback from players and from the add-on developers would help guide us towards areas where best serving our community meant loosening some of the API restrictions, adding new base functionality to shore up gaps, and or providing new tools for add-on developers to allow them to build effectively in this new environment. So yeah, like that is what we expected they were doing. That is in fact what they were doing. We're not wrong. While we haven't been sharing detailed technical updates directly with add-on developers, just to be clear, while we have been sharing detailed technical updates directly with add-on developers, we haven't always given the broader player base a clear sense of what to expect with Midnight. In other words, they are actively talking with the add-on developers to make sure that the add-on developers have every single detail of what is being opened back up and having these open conversations about what needs to open back up. They haven't necessarily been sharing all that publicly with the player base. So in other words, you may not be seeing the work that is actually going into Blizzard working with add-on developers to try and meet a common ground, I guess, between what Blizzard's going to be working on and what those developers will have access to play around with when they're developing these add-ons. As a result, we have seen some players alarmed by the prospect of losing add-on functionality that we expect to be entirely preserved in Midnight. So we want to offer a clear understanding of what to... I gotta start this over again. So we want to offer a clear understanding of what is and isn't currently planned to change. The developer note on this is add-ons and user interface changes are in active development and will continue to see major changes and iterations throughout Midnight beta testing. All information provided here is subject to change, which is their usual little caveat that they put in because they want to be sure that players are not expecting, I guess, things to be set in stone and carved in stone when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, and which, I mean, obviously we had a lot more to dig into in this post, but my immediate thought here, I mean, you mentioned it at the top of the segment, is like, yeah, where was this before alpha shipped, before people were starting to play it? That's one thing. Another thing is, with this kind of shifting landscape, I mean, add-ons don't get developed in a vacuum in the blink of an eye, right? Like there's work and testing and blood, sweat, and tears that goes into add-ons functioning for players by the add-on authors. So we're on a pretty tight timeline here. I think it's safe to say that we're pretty sure that Midnight's going to be out by like March. Okay. It's already practically November, and you pulled the rug out from under a bunch of add-on developers. And now the goalposts aren't really clear, and the functionality is not maybe where it's going to end up, and the timeline is tight. So do we end up in a world where, like, okay, they roll back some of the restrictions that are preventing some add-ons from doing what the authors want them to be doing, but there's not enough time to get them into shape for players to use them early on in Midnight? Like, is it a situation where we're waiting, months because the add-on authors haven't had the time to make their add-ons work the way that they can work because Blizzard didn't open up the API or didn't loosen a restriction in a timely manner, and there just wasn't time to QC the changes, and so it becomes this weird waiting game that stretches well beyond the launch of Midnight Expansion. This all ties back into, I mean, we've had many conversations about this issue already on the show in the last few weeks. It's like the amount of pressure that Blizzard is putting on themselves and applying to the entire, user interface system around the game. It's getting harder all the time for me to understand, like, what is the upshot? Like, what's the upside of this for Blizzard, for the game in general? Like, why are they taking this kind of really heavy-handed approach versus saying, okay, we're going to do our work first. We're going to make the baseline UI really good, and then we're going to start restricting access to stuff, and we're going to, set a longer timeline for the add-on developers to adjust or not, or whatever the case may be. This is all good stuff to hear at the top of this post, but it doesn't make me feel any differently about kind of the space that Blizzard is moving the game into.
Yeah, and there's a couple things there that I'd want to chat about, and the first of which is, the only thing I can assume is that because they've asked their encounter design team to design the fights and encounters for Midnight based upon the add-on restrictions that they have in their mind, they did not want those fights and all that content to be massively trivialized by still having other add-ons functioning during that window of time, which might have just meant that Midnight wasn't the expansion to start scaling back that player challenge and difficulty, and maybe they needed another expansion of time to sort of figure that out. But yeah, like it might be a situation where they didn't want both of them running in tandem because it meant that were so trivializing content that existed by having these add-ons still functioning this way that it just didn't make sense, right? Like that's the only kind of take I can come at this from, of why they chose not to do that and not to wait as far as that goes. But the other thing I wanted to mention, and this comes down to the add-on developers, because you talked about their timeline and how long they have to develop and etc. And there's a couple things here to unpack. The first to me is that we know, as being people who create content for the community in doing podcasting and this sort of thing, that not everyone gets the same treatment in that community. There are creators that are larger creators that have larger pull, depending on who's working on the community team, how much resources the community team has, how much bandwidth they have to actually handle requests and what's happening with stuff. That typically there are larger creators who float to the top and get special attention, or at least they have in the past. I remember a time where Jason and I went to a BlizzCon and certain creators were being given jackets with their names on them and other creators were not. And it didn't matter what the actual numbers necessarily worked out as far as viewership or downloads or things like that. It was just how Blizzard's team at the time saw those creators as being the ones they wanted to give the special treatment to versus the ones who they weren't giving the special treatment to. And it was very odd to sort of be in that space when they sort of are picking and choosing. And where I'm getting to with this is I have to imagine the add-on community is very similar. I have to imagine that, the add-ons that have been around for a long time, that are very well established and have a large following to them, probably have access to a much higher level, maybe even access at all to communication with developers and who they're choosing to talk to, versus someone who, we had a guy write into the show recently, is developing their own tank add-on and has just thrown their hands up and gone, I can't do anything because of the changes that are happening here. That person might not be receiving any communication or have any way to communicate with the devs as to what's happening behind the scenes and everything else. Because as much as there's a lot of content creators for World of Warcraft, there's also a lot of people who generate add-ons and want to make add-ons for World of Warcraft. So I have to imagine that is an equal problem they probably have. Is, it's nice to see them saying, hey, we're giving detailed technical updates directly with add-on developers. And you're like, okay, is there, I'm not aware of this, but there might be. I assume there's an add-on developer Discord server that people are all joined into and have communication with inside that Discord experience. But I don't know what the requirement is to get into that Discord. I don't know what the restrictions are in that. I don't know any of that. So my assumption is that, there probably are people out there who are throwing their hands up saying, I am not going to develop something for this just because I have no idea what's coming, even if the devs are sharing technical detailed data of what's coming with certain other add-on developers. So it's an odd space to work in, and it's an imperfect space to work in. And so it's just accepting those restrictions as part of that deal. But that is something that is going to affect timelines and what add-ons we see and how those add-ons are developed going forward, because you're as much as I'm sure they're talking to WeCores, I'm sure they're talking to LVUI, I'm sure they're talking to DBM, I'm sure they're talking to Bigwigs, I'm sure they're talking to Details, I'm sure they're talking to all these folks that are large add-on developers. The Joe Blows tank info or whatever it is that has maybe 1,200 downloads or something is not one of the ones who's gotten access to this yet, and is able to do that. So I don't know. I don't know what the efforts are there. I hope that what the team's doing is just basically said, look, if you know an add-on developer or you are an add-on developer, you can reach out to us and we'll get you into this space so that you can do it. That might be what the situation is.
Yeah. Or some kind of technical details on a forum somewhere. I don't know. I would hope so, because there are niche add-ons that are not like there's sort of that class or that suite of add-ons that many players are going to have installed, right? But then there's niche ones that maybe you like for a specific purpose, but are not something that's sort of a starter pack, right? Of WoW add-ons or whatever you'd recommend to somebody, and it's like, they all have their place, they all have value, and they're all the result of somebody's hard work to get them up and running and functioning in the game. So I don't know. I feel like the communication around these changes, they say that they've been, sharing updates directly with developers. I feel like we haven't always given the broader player base a clear sense of what changes to expect with Midnight. Is an understatement. That is one of those Blizzard understatements that slips into posts like this. It's like people have no idea what to expect, and we can't currently see where we're going. So it's one thing for for Blizzard to put out a post like this. It outlines kind of the goals and the philosophy for what they want add-ons to look like in 2026 and beyond, and that's good. And it's better late than never in this case. Maybe a month late, but better than never. I do want to just kind of frame also part of the rest of this discussion with the fact that right after this blog post came out, LVUI announced suspension of development, which is a massive blow to people that rely on the LVUI suite to play the game. Some of what they're saying and doing here is kind of incongruous with what's actually happening around the add-on development community, which is big add-on authors are checking out and going, I can't make the thing that I want to make with what I'm being offered by Blizzard at this point. So granted, as Blizzard is saying up front and center, this is still an ongoing process. They're still iterating on what this is going to look like. There's more changes to come. Fantastic. But there's also a timeline concern. And, the authors have to have the time to be able to work within the new restrictions and come up with a result that they're happy with and that they can quality control and have players use. So I feel like that's kind of a funny subtext to this post is like, as soon as it comes out, one of the bigger add-on authors that people rely on is like, yeah, no, I can't work with this.
Well, it's tricky, right? Because what you have to consider their workflow is we develop, for example, LVUI. We develop LVUI. That is our full-time work that we're doing. The Blizzard has now asked us to engage in overtime work so that we can have communication with them on a regular basis about what we need from Blizzard in order to continue doing this thing that we love to do. And so I imagine over the past month to month and a half at least, there's been very ongoing talks about what they need and how it's going to work and et cetera, et cetera. And at a certain point, I know I would feel like, look, I went from working 40 hours a week on this to working 60. I need to scale out all of this. Like, I need to take a break. And you guys can keep doing whatever it is you're doing, Blizzard. We'll have a look at this in 2 months and see where you're at and see what we might be able to put together then, which is why they say they're suspending development on it, because it just, to me, is one of those cases of having a moving target constantly is not easy to work with at all. And if you're in meetings that, like, if suddenly because of this change, you're now in meetings 3 to 4 times more than you previously were on a weekly basis, that sucks. Like, it just does in general. And I can see any of them going, we're taking a break from this. This is our passion project. This isn't something that, like, we're making full-time living necessarily, or maybe not everyone is making full-time living doing this. I'm out of here. Not surprised by that at all. And what we're going to get into here for the rest of this post is going to help outline a little more what they would have access to and where Blizzard's kind of intending to go with some of these tools that exist. And I think in a lot of cases, they're like, that's great, but that's not enough for what we were developing, or we had a lot more other plans, and we just, we're going to wait and see, basically, is where I think a lot of these go. And then I think we're going to hit the point that you talked about, which is we're going to have a launch of Midnight with very few add-ons that actually function and work. And most likely we're going to have the first month and a half to 2 months of that expansion with whatever Blizzard's provided us with, because a lot of those developers will be working on things and putting things together. And it's really going to be just resting there, hanging out. Well, Blizzard's UI is literally going to be hanging out there for people to just pick apart and be angry at, and et cetera, because of the restrictions that were put into place. But I will reinforce the point I made earlier of, like, look, I feel like to a certain degree they had to strip stuff back the way they did. And they had the communication absolutely could have been better. And they are opening doors back up for stuff to work. But they have to be sure that whatever their team is putting forward is going to be enough to complement people's playstyles and accessibility needs. And I think their objective is that it will. I don't know if they have enough time to do it. And that's the big scary part for me. So we'll see what we end up with. But let's continue this post. So the power to customize is the next header that they have in here. The main goal of the changes coming with Midnight is straightforward. Add-ons should not be able to automate combat decisions for the player. Combat is an important distinction here, as we have done our best to avoid interfering with access to non-combat information. Furthermore, add-ons should retain their ability to customize how information is presented to the player. In Midnight, add-ons will continue to be capable of providing many of the features and customizations players have long enjoyed. This includes adjusting the look of almost everything you see in the user interface, such as raid frames, nameplates, action bars, panels, fonts, and art. Add-ons will also be able to present combat information to the player in ways that differ from the base UI. Let's use the new boss warnings UI coming in Midnight as an example. This new UI presents the player with a timeline view of upcoming boss abilities. Add-ons will be able to take the information provided and choose a different way of displaying it, such as a stack of cooldown bars. They can also change how the timeline looks to help with an accessibility need or a personal aesthetic preference. Add-ons can add their own custom events to the timeline, such as break timers. As another example of Midnight add-on functionality, let's look at the important casts in nameplates. In Midnight, our base nameplates show the player when an enemy is casting an important spell by making it brighter and playing a flash animation around it. Add-ons will be able to adjust the appearance of important state casts, such as making the cast bar larger or giving it a different animation to suit individual preference. Overall, you can think of it this way. If the UI displays a piece of combat information, add-ons, in most cases, will be able to present that information to you in a different way. However, add-ons will no longer be able to use that combat information to drive custom logic or make decisions for you. We're actively working with add-on developers to address any issues they're facing with the new APIs and to give them the maximum amount of customization possible while still meeting our goals. So, what does this mean? This means, yes, the look, appearance, and sound of any alert that is just sort of built into the base UI is something that can be played with and broken out and presented to you as information in a variety of different ways. What it won't do is go, hey, this ability was cast on you, therefore, show this thing of you need to move to this place. That will not be something that's in there. You will not have the ability to go, okay, I'm going to put down a bunch of boss markers around the room so we know that, there's green, triangle, and yellow star, and we're going to have it so that if a player is targeted by this ability, the weak aura, in that case, will pop up on your screen and say, you go to green triangle, and the weak aura will pop on the different person's screen and go, you go, because it was cast slightly after them, to yellow star. You'll actually have to learn that dance yourself, or it be communicated vocally, or you'll have to have planned that ahead of time so the first person goes here, the second person goes there. The weak aura will not be able to essentially go, because this was cast first, therefore you go here, because this was cast second, therefore you go there. That is the logic that they're moving away from in this add-on design. But what they can do is make that pop-up bar look like a big triangle if they wanted to, and make the pop-up bar for someone else look like a yellow, star for that person, not for that specific cast, but for every cast. So if you always want someone when they get this spell to go to the triangle marker, then, and not about first or second or anything, if they always did, then you could make the pop-up for that particular spell be a triangle, and people know, hey, when this ability happens, we need to move to triangle. And that is a way they could communicate that sort of thing, but it wouldn't be like Ed gets a triangle shape and, Jason gets a star shape. That's not how that works. It would be everyone would get the same shape because you're using a custom add-on UI that way. So keep that in mind. It wouldn't change based off of who it got cast on first. That's what they're moving towards.
Yeah, I think like the UI customization has always been sort of the point of add-ons, and then over the years it got into, this whole sort of arms race that we've talked about a bunch between encounter design and what the UI, custom UIs are presenting to players, and then the whole private aura thing where now we're hiding data from add-ons. And I think like the ultimate goal is to get back to a point where, well, an add-on can help you take a thing that the game shows you in a way that you don't like and make it more in a way that you do like. I mean, they give the example in this post. There's a little video in this section, which we cannot communicate via audio, but it's an example of what the boss timeline looks like. And it's okay. It shows like a sequence of abilities, and there's sort of like a threshold where it hits, a 5-second window where it's going to cast soon, and it's just icons of abilities, and there's no specific timers on them, right? You can kind of gauge based on where the 5-second thing is, but that's about it. I've been using DBM for decades, right? And I do a lot of shot calling. And one of my little tricks is I give myself about a second and a half buffer on when I make a call on something, right? So if something's coming up in 3, I'll start queuing up my mic to call it a little bit earlier than 3, so that by the time people can hear and understand and process what I'm saying, that now they have 3 seconds to react to the mechanic or whatever. It sounds like potentially they want to allow add-ons to continue to be able to manipulate that boss timeline data, and maybe present it as cooldown bars. Hopefully that means with timers and with ability names instead of just icons, and with just the timeline where you don't have specific timing information. So that's immediately what I thought of when I read this section. Like, okay, that seems okay, but I think I still want, I want an add-on to hook into this, because all I'm seeing is icons and a vague idea of where an ability is on its cooldown or on its timer. So it'll be interesting to see exactly like what they mean by they can also change how the timeline looks, or for accessibility or aesthetic preference. That's a big question. That's kind of a loaded statement, right? That means something different to everybody that's going to read it. Adding custom events to the timeline, like what are the use cases for this? What is the sort of goal or pie in the sky vision of like what is acceptable on Blizzard's side, from their perspective? What are the things that they want add-on developers to be able to do with this? And it's not super clear in this picture, but I mean, from the example you can see 2 things immediately. Number one, it's way better than what we have in the baseline UI. Like, it's a vast improvement over the baseline UI, but it's also lacking compared to the kind of boss mods that we've been used to having since I don't know how long, since the very early days of raiding and stuff. Not necessarily the weak auras and all these much more sort of complicated tools to solve boss problems that boss encounters present to you, but just things like timers and call outs that we've been using from the very early days. It just doesn't have that. So it just begs the question, like, you say that this is stuff that you think is acceptable for add-ons to be doing, but what does the proof look like in that pudding? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's impossible to tell from this post at the moment.
Yeah. It's it certainly is. I do think their timeline is really basic looking, and I think obviously they're probably still iterating on it because it's alpha build. But in general, that is something that people are going to be able to play with and skin and make exactly the way they want. And I know there's going to be plenty of add-on people out there who hop in and make better timeline reminders or whatever it is, right? And basically let you have larger icons that move to smaller icons and all sorts of different things as far as that goes. Or as they said, you can take those, as opposed to them moving along the timeline, they could be stacking bars. They count down the way that we normally see from things like DBM and bigwigs and that kind of thing. So that's all part of it. All right, the next header here is continued focus on accessibility. As part of our continued focus for text-to-speech, we're working on the addition of new features in Midnight to provide combat audio alerts. This system will allow players to turn on text-to-speech alerts for various important combat events. Some examples include the ability to announce when combat begins and ends, to announce your death, and resources at regular intervals. To announce your health and resources at regular intervals. Probably also, announces your death because it would announce the combat ended. Just keep that in mind. To play sounds when you gain or lose secondary resource like combo points, to announce your target's name and health and more. So lots of different options in there, and that's again where I dip into like, I'd love if I could announce when a spell was going to expire on a certain target. So I need to refresh something or have a sound play when I need to refresh something. That's the importance of that story. There will also be options to choose voice, speed, and volume settings. These options will appear in user interface menu, in the user interface menu, and under the accessibility options section along with / commands. I'm curious about the choose voice, speed, and volume. I'm hoping this isn't like an AI thing that they're making happen, because it would be pretty terrible. And I also would love if this was customizable by add-ons. If an add-on developer could actually have a pack of voices or different language packs. All these things are going to be really important in here. So just keep that in mind as well. Yeah, I mean, it's great to see. I'm glad they're dipping their toes into accessibility. It's something I know a lot of people use right now for the raid cooldowns and raid reminders, is a voice that tells them, like, you know, dodge or move left or whatever it is as far as when abilities are happening. So I think that's going to be helpful. And low health is a big one. If your health dips low, it'd be great to have a voice that was like low health or something. You're like, oh, right, I need to use health stone. That would be a good deal for that whole stuff. So good to see that.
Yeah, we got to get a Coltrane voice pack though, or else this just ain't gonna fly. That's the number one thing. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, it's interesting to me that they mention accessibility in this post, and it's it is one of the focuses here for them to as they move forward. But also, like, there are massive accessibility concerns with the changes that they're making, and this seems like the text-to-speech thing is nice, and it's one nice element of accessibility, but accessibility is a broad spectrum.
Yes.
And they are removing, at least as it currently stands, like, players are losing more accessibility than they're gaining with these changes. But I do like, the option of using this, more, like we were talking earlier, just having more options in the baseline UI, just in the game out of the box, because even if even with in a world with more streamlined classes and encounters, I'm going to guess that there's still going to be a lot of information to visually parse and quickly react to and make decisions about. So just having the option to set alerts, text-to-speech alerts for certain particular things that maybe are harder for you to pay attention to visually, or maybe things that you can't pay attention to visually at all, or just other things that maybe you have a bad habit of doing. Like, these things they are accessibility features, but they could also fill the gaps of maybe some of the add-on restrictions in some ways. An example I think about for myself is, like, I need a simple way to track how much rage I have at any point in time. And there's no good way to do that. I've been using a weak aura to do that simply in a way that I can put it where my relevant combat stuff is.
Right.
And the current, the current UI options that were being offered don't really give me a way to do that in a way that I like.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if there's a way you could turn on a text-to-speech prompt or some kind of ding when you hit a certain rage threshold if you're playing a warrior, right? Like, that would be super helpful. So, there is some good. I'm being very negative in this discussion, I feel like, and rightfully so. I feel justified in my negativity, even as somebody who I don't really even use a lot of add-ons for my personal gameplay. But I do feel like there are good things in here. It's just, this is like the baby steps of the UI overhaul that the game has needed for a very long time. And they're doing it essentially like at gunpoint. They're turning the gun on themselves and going, like, we're going to get all this right in the next 4 months, we promise, and we're going to help the add-on developers make it so that you don't hate it. And it just makes you kind of think, like, why you could broaden this timeline. You could give yourself more time to do this and bring the stuff in, bring these pieces in at a bit of a slower pace and really dial them in to a point where they're usable, instead of going, here's the changes, here's what our substitutions are, hope everything works out.
Yeah, exactly. All right, healing and raid frames. Over the past weeks, we've heard clear feedback from healers about limitations in our default raid frames. While add-ons will still be able to significantly customize the look and feel of these raid frames in Midnight, We are working on improvements to help address some of the issues, man, the non-committals. We are working on improvements to help address some of the issues players have been relying on add-ons to solve. We are adding a setting allowing players to choose from 3 different layouts for the information shown in each frame. The existing layout, which is name top left, buffs bottom right, debuffs top left, dispels top right, will still be the default, but we're adding 2 additional configurations inspired by popular add-on offerings. For dispels, magic, poison, curse, or disease, we are making them bolder on the frame so they're easier to notice, along with color and border visualizations. We're also adding support to display when a player has a major defensive or similar ability active. We will also make role-specific debuffs like tank swaps larger so players who are playing that role can know they need to pay special attention to them. Again, add-ons will still be able to reskin frames or create totally customized raid frames for those who prefer that. So, couple things. They showed us a preview image of what this looks like, and one of the things on the preview image that I highlighted was what looks like line of sight icon. And I was like, ooh, does this mean this activates when a target is in range but behind a pillar or down a staircase or something? Or is this a out of range, and so it is showing that, hey, they're too far away? Like, when does this activate? And I didn't get a reply from Blizzard to that yet, but I did get a reply from someone named Samzord on Twitter, who said that the characters are all named, the characters on this image that we have of all the healing UI are all named after Brazilian soap operas. One of the senior UX designers is Brazilian, and this character's name is Tonho from the moon, so I'm guessing he's out of range. The moon is pretty far away. So that is I wanted to highlight that because I thought it was hilarious, and it is actually true that one of the senior UX designers is Brazilian, and so we did in fact get a list of all of the different Brazilian soap opera names that's on the screenshot that I just thought was a really neat touch. So if you're looking at this healing screenshot, that's where all those names came from. But yeah, the screenshot itself does highlight that, hey, when someone has a poison, their frame is now highlighted with a green border. It has the poison icon in the top right. You know that is a dispellable thing. We also can see that some people have a debuff in the bottom left that they're currently tracking as well. And there's a big personal up on one of the tanks. So that's in the center of the square. And like, this is useful. My number one complaint, to be honest, about the base UI is it isn't scalable enough. I need to be able to make this thing as large and as tiny as I want it to be. If I want this to be a bunch of single block boxes that take up like a 15th of my screen, then I should be able to do that. Like, I don't think there's an issue with allowing you to scale this thing so tiny that it's almost not even apparent on your screen if you want it to be. I also think if you're gonna make it so that tank swaps are being tracked inside of raid frames, you should be able to break the tanks out from those raid frames, make them scaled independent of anything else, the size that you want, and set up your own custom UI for that particular tank frame. I think is the other thing that is independent of the other frames. And I do know that there are ways to toggle on tanks and track tanks and that kind of stuff. And so it might fall into that category of what they're doing customizability wise. But I know that a lot of people for tank swaps use weak auras or use some sort of boss add-on to remind people when to taunt and when to taunt off each other and how that taunt swap's going to work. And shifting the responsibility of that over to raid frames is a weird kind of decision to make, but that's an existing decision that they're choosing to make there. So keep that in mind as well. Overall, I like that they're doing 3 different layouts. So go ahead. You can talk about the tank stuff for sure.
Oh yeah. I was going to say, like, so this is not going to shock you or many of our listeners, but I use the standard raid frames when I'm raiding. I play a tank, and so I don't have that pressure that healers have, where it's like the frames really don't tell me the information that I need in a way that I can interact with. But I have found, like, I frequently these days have found this pain point of, like, I wish that I could see my co-tank and debuff status? Like, is there, especially when I'm learning a fight, right? Where it's like, okay, how does the swap here work? Like, what's the timing on it like? And, oh, well, there's nothing on his frame. So does that mean he has something or not? And usually it's just like, well, yeah, there's an effect, but there's just nothing in the frame. And so then it's like, okay, well, I could set up like a focus target, and then I have, I can see his debuffs in there, and that's that just adds even more visual noise and more stuff to kind of direct your attention to. I do like the idea of being able to see those tank swap, tank buster kind of debuffs in the frames. That again, this feels like paying off debt from the last several decades of just like, here's frames, I guess, have fun out there. I do think the default raid frames have gotten better over the years, but not everybody's in a position where they can say, the default frames are good enough for me to use, right? Like I feel like I'm in that position generally, but for healers especially, this has just been, it's been a non-starter, even with the changes that they've made over the years. So
yeah.
Hopefully that this is enough. Being able to customize what you're saying with the frame size and everything, that seems like a thing that add-ons would be allowed to do. The question becomes,
why isn't it base?
Is Blizzard allowing the frames to pull in enough information for it to still be what people actually need to see, right? Like adding the debuff type icon thing, it could be big, especially if we're seeing encounters where there's maybe more kind of granularity to stuff that needs to be dispelled or whatever, like what types of debuffs are going out. And so there's a bit more decision making with that or something. Like, these are good steps, but does it replace what people are used to for healing frames like out of the gate? I don't know. And it's reasonable to assume that, okay, the new structure means that you'll be able to make your frames look like whatever you want, or like, the size however you want, but they're not going to have any different data than what the default frames have. So is that going to be enough data for people to actually heal with? That's the question that comes to my mind when I read this.
Well, and here's the thing, right? So the stuff that I know this needs, you need to be able to essentially approve list or deny list for buffs and debuffs. That has to be a thing. You have to be able to go, hey, do not show me when this person has recently been revived by a Death Knight. I don't need that buff showing there that this has happened. I don't need to know that this person is still suffering from exhaustion from having heroism. That isn't a debuff I need tracked in frames ever. So I need to be able to turn that off, right? Because that's just spam information that doesn't need to be there. I don't need to know that someone has a particular toy that's been used on them. Like, there's just a lot of information buff-wise that can just bloat the crap out of your frames.
It's like flavor, really, more than, there's like flavor buffs or debuffs, whatever you want to call them, really more than anything. They don't tell you anything important in combat.
Yeah. And you need to be able to filter all that stuff out, and you need to be able to choose to filter out what you want to filter out. So you need to have that approved and deny list. Some people call it a blacklist and a whitelist. I try to move away from that kind of language as much as I can, but yeah, so approved and deny list would be really helpful for buffs and debuffs. The ability to change font type and size is something that it sounds like we're going to be getting. So a lot of people, need to be able to scale that stuff larger, smaller, how many letters are shown inside of a name, that kind of stuff is really helpful to be able to do. So, it sounds like add-ons will be able to provide some of that, but that'd be great base UI as far as that goes. The ability to change anchors. So like where buffs and debuffs show text inside the frame. Like, I know that they're going to give us 3 options and you get to work with those 3 options, but let's be sure that the add-on designers have the ability to move those things around too and can actually put those where you want to put them. So if you want to have all of your HOTS along the bottom right, and you want to have all of your, debuffs in the top right, and then not show anything when someone needs to be dispelled other than the entire color of their frame changes color, then let's have that be an option. Like, let's be sure that we can do those sorts of things, because that's important too. There's a lot that I guess I would want out of this. And I think the stuff that the tools exist for them to incorporate them into the base UI. And I understand they're going to give us 3 options. And I think that is because they do not have time to create a template system where someone's able to create a template of their UI the way they want it and piece it all together the way they want it, and then be able to save that and share that with people using the in-game share tools and do all that stuff so they can share everything they want to share and do everything they want to do built inside of the base UI. I'm assuming that's why. They're going to go, we're going to give these 3 options. We just don't have time as far as that goes. Because being able to like make frames essentially black unless someone takes damage and then they highlight that color, that's something a lot of people do. Being able to make it so that you can actually use a color wheel with varying degrees of color to set colors for things, as opposed to like pick from these 5 different colors or use class colors or don't use class colors. That's an important thing for people to be able to do if they want to have all their frames be a certain color and then change to a certain color when certain actions are happening. I see a lot of people who have solid green frames, and then when someone takes damage, they become yellow, and then when someone takes a lot of damage and they're low, they become red. And you can sort of have that varying degrees of green, yellow, red, like you would with stop, yield, go for any of those sort of situations. So like it's just really important to have those features for players. And I know that they're saying, hey, our solution is we're going to allow add-on authors to build all those things that you want. What I'm saying is, guys, if you're aiming to essentially provide a really useful tool for players that they're going to use, you need to start incorporating this stuff. You can't just rely on add-on authors to do this. You yourselves need to start adding to the base UI these sorts of tools and elements, because they should just be there. Like that should just be something you have access to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that, and that's sort of the, I don't know. To me, that's sort of the weird corner that they're backing themselves into. It's like, why do all this if you're not going to end up with a baseline UI that's as flexible, and you're still going to let add-ons do this customization work in a world where edit mode and these other things exist? It's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to understand why they wanted to do this and why they want to do it the way that they're doing it. And I think the post that we got, it's good to lay out sort of where they want to go. It's not clear how that we're going to get there and what it's going to look like, once we end up there. It's better to have this than to not have it, this particular post. But then again, the whole thing really got undercut when LVUI was like, yeah, we're suspending development at this point. It's like, well, LVUI for a lot of players is kind of the perfect example of like what they want as an alternative to Blizzard's UI, I feel like. So hey man, it's another step down the road, and I will see, I know there's going to be plenty more to come with the rest of alpha, whatever that looks like. We're probably nearing the end of the alpha phase of testing. We'll be moving into beta. Maybe we'll see a more robust shakeup at that point. And I got to think at this point that it's going to be sort of an ongoing kind of push-pull between what players want and what add-on developers are able to do and what Blizzard's willing to allow. I don't think this is a thing that stops the day that Midnight launches. So it's just, I feel like add-on authors and a lot of players are going to be in an uncomfortable position as this stuff continues to unfold. And it's just to me, it just seems unfortunate. Why inflict this pain until you have more time to give yourselves to get some of this baseline stuff up to speed and incorporate the stuff that you already know that players are going to want add-on authors to cover the gaps in, right? Like you're saying it in this post that like there's going to be elements that you expect that add-ons are going to handle because you're not going to offer the options. Like why even go down that road? Then like if add-ons are going to provide this functionality, then why not add it yourselves as well?
Exactly. And that's where
it's very strange.
That's where I was sort of highlighting, like, we know they're giving us 3 options for what these frames are going to look like, and I really do believe it's because they do not have time to be able to build out a proper system that actually lets you filter what debuffs you see and move where they are in your frames and adjust how things work. And like I don't think they have a proper tool set in place yet or time in place yet to be able to build that. And so they're like, well, we're going to put 3 stock ones together, and then, hopefully add-on authors sort of fix the rest of it. But what we think we're going to put inside the stock UI is going to be essentially enough to sort of get by. And if people need it to look like something different, then they can. I want to take a moment for the LVUI stuff, because it's been around for a long time. LVUI has been around for a long time.
And it's been something that people have relied on for their UI for a very long time and loved. They loved how the chat features worked in it, and then they loved how the debuff stuff worked in it. Now all the plates work really well with LVUI, and so the LVUI as a developer, as an add-on, has sort of expanded itself out into being this all-encompassing UI replacement. And so I'm not shocked at all that these changes have dramatically broken what it can do, because it has fingers that reach into everything, basically, right? So it's not surprising to me that is creating some serious issues for them. It's been an add-on for a long time that when we'd get a patch for content, if LVUI was not in place, you had people who just wouldn't play the game for a period of time. They would be like, well, I got to wait a week until LVUI gets its update, and then I can actually log in and do things. And I've always steered away from it for that exact reason. I feel like when new content is coming out and I'm excited to play the new content, I don't want an add-on to be a reason why I'm not enjoying that and not diving into that, which just, to me, seems like a strange thing to rely on. But I know a lot of people who use it and a lot of people who swear by it and a lot of people who love it. So we'll see what happens with LVUI down the line. My guess is they are simply pausing their development because Alpha's at a stage where Blizzard is needing to open a bunch of things back up in order for their add-on to start working again. And they're basically like, look, we're at 40% ready LVUI for what's going to happen with Midnight, but we can't move to 41 until you guys get your stuff in order and are able to sort of, get your progress done. And you guys have to hit 80% of your progress before we can move forward. And so we're just telling everyone, don't expect to see anything happen in Alpha. Don't expect to hear anything from us for a period of time, because we aren't going to be working on developing this for a while, right? Just, that's a thing. Just keep that in mind, right? I think it's more of a PSA than it is a protest post, in my opinion, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's up to Blizzard, right? Like, yeah. It kind of depends on what ends up being allowed and what the timeline looks like. So I can certainly understand any add-on developer being like, you know what, I'm going to keep lines of communication open, but I'm not going to be like doing any kind of active development on a Midnight version of this add-on at this time. It makes sense. It's sort of, it makes less sense to go, oh, well, let me see what I can do with this very restrictive version of the game in place, and let me see how I can work around it, and what I can do in terms of what I've done previously. Makes more sense to go, you know what, I'm going to wait. I'm going to check my Discord. I'm going to check my forums, and we'll revisit it at some point down the road. Yeah. And so the onus is on Blizzard to present options for these authors, or just provide an in-game alternative that's good enough.
Yeah, exactly. All right, there were a couple other blog posts that came out this week that we're going to save for next week. The updates on healer specializations in Midnight, as well as the healing changes in Midnight. This speaks directly to them removing interrupts from the majority of healing classes. Obviously, they mentioned that Wind Shear for Restoration Shamans is going to be increased to a 30-second cooldown. This, in general, has stirred a lot of conversation within the community. I wouldn't be surprised if there was more comments on this post later. My hot take that I'll throw in here for this week is that I actually think this is a good change. I think that this is shifting the onus back to tanks and DPS to actually be pressing the buttons that they need to be pressing on a regular basis to be able to progress through content, and that in general, with them pruning down the amount of complexity that there is to classes, you'll have fewer buttons to press anyways. So hopefully you're pressing these ones correctly more often, is what hopefully ends up happening. But that's my initial hot take on these changes as far as what they're doing with interrupt stuff. I enjoyed interrupting, but I often found myself getting frustrated as a healer doing more interrupts than DPS, and in some really bad cases, tanks during Mythic Plus dungeons. That should never be happening. I have to shapeshift into cat form in order to interrupt something. And yes, I can do that if I choose to talent into it with one global, but that is still essentially me having to charge into melee range as a healer, which is not something healers really like doing, and then interrupt something and then shapeshift back out and be doing healing, which again can happen within one global, depending on how your UI is set up and your buttons are set up. But yeah, it is something that is very strange to have the onus on the healer for, And if they're trying to pare back complexity of classes, this is a great place to start for healers, in my opinion, as far as this goes. I enjoy the mini game of interrupting, but I'm not going to miss it. That's basically where I'm at.
Yeah, I get that. I kind of look at it from a different angle, which is like, why not just turn down the temperature overall on interrupt pressure on groups, and then keep healer interrupts as an option for skill expression for somebody like you who really enjoys doing it, or, you know, especially when you have like a resto shaman or something where you have a really great interrupt in wind shear, which is surviving in the plan is for it to survive in a slightly different incarnation. But why remove the possibility of skill expression? Why not just tune the kind of pressure of interrupts on a dungeon group, for example? I think dungeons is probably where it's really the most pronounced usually. Why not just tune that around the expectation that the healer interrupts are not going to be an essential part of the process, right? For like a general slate of pulls that will time a dungeon, if you have a competent tank performing their interrupts and maybe, you know, one or two other DPS that are actually using their abilities, then it won't be a situation where a healer is required to ever push an interrupt, right? But I don't see why that isn't possible while still leaving healer interrupt abilities and talents like in the game, because it allows players to express themselves and have that kind of play style. And like, oh, you could be a really boss healer who's interrupting stuff and just totally in control of combat in this Mythic Plus. Like, that could be a really fun place for some players to exist. But, you know, there's obviously a massive downside with having that expectation that a healer is going to be an essential component of interrupt gameplay and saving the team from these types of, you know, potentially run-wrecking abilities. I feel like there's a way to approach the problem that they're getting at that isn't take stuff away from players, that allows them to express their skill with their gameplay.
Yeah, I fully understand that. I certainly appreciate it, because I have a certain level of pride in beating DPS with interrupts, because it's like, look, I'm able to do my job plus a chunk of yours better than you are, is what that sort of like is, that flex that can happen there. So yeah, I feel like I enjoy that loop aspect of it, but I also feel like there's a crutch that is happening within the community, and that crutch is allowing players to cover too much of the essential tasks of doing a dungeon and essential roles of doing a dungeon without, like, there's too much overlap in that happening. So why did you not wipe in this dungeon? Well, it wasn't because the DPS were doing the right thing. It's because the healer happened to be covering the really important interrupts. Well, that shouldn't be happening. The DPS, who literally in some cases gain damage from using their interrupts, they actually gain resource that they can then spend through interrupting something. Like that actually is a thing, are not interrupting things, right? Like that is actually a thing that exists, and it's very strange that that's the situation, but we run into that where you essentially are saying, hey, we're enabling bad play by allowing healers to have this. Is kind of the other place my mind goes to with this. But we'll talk about that more next week, and along with the other healing changes in Midnight, where they're talking about basically the development philosophy behind healing and what they want healing to look like. That'll be on the menu for then. Until then, we like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm going to give a special shout out to Arajian, Anthony, Bradley, Bruce, Chris, James, Garrett, Kapawi, and Shorel. Thank you so much for all that you give, as well as all of our patrons. You are wonderful. We appreciate all of you, and you are the reason that sort of keeps the lights on and everything else going around here. So our Patreon, if you're looking for it, can be found at patreon.com/thestartingzone. And we got no new patrons to announce this week, but we do appreciate the ones that have been with us past and present, and hopefully future. And we'll see you all next week for that show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, patrons, for everything you've contributed to us and the cause here over the many years we've been keeping the show rolling, and the Patreon has existed. It's meant a lot. It helps us tremendously. It keeps the show on track. And as we always like to say, if you like today's episode, thank a patron.
Yeah. that's going to wrap up episode 707 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode, leave a comment on the show. You can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and you want to, give us one of those 5-star reviews, you can head on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify. Leave us those 5-star reviews. We appreciate them very much. They help raise us up those charts and more people find the show. If you want to contact the show and leave your feedback or email a question to us, you can do that at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Blue Sky at thestartingzone.bsky.social or at The Starting Zone on X, or you can hit us up at thestartingzone.com/Discord and join our Discord server over there. Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
You can find me on socials over on Twitter at Shieldwald or on Blue Sky at jlucas.bsky.social. Mostly just post to Blue Sky these days, but I do check both sites with regularity, so come say hi either way. You can find video channels at twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. Didn't end up streaming any WoW this week for various reasons. So I don't know. Streams might be kind of on the way out for a while. Kind of depends on what the raid schedule's looking like. It might be down to like a 1 night a week thing or something for streams. But come check out the video channels regardless. We'll check in there from time to time.
All right. If you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey, over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD, on Blue Sky at SpencerHD.bsky.social, or on YouTube at youtube.com/@SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.